Made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you.
The customer is always right. お客様は神様です. Those two phrases might sound like the same idea in English and Japanese because, well, they are. But consider what is actually being said and the difference in gravitas between them. I want you to think about appearances and the concept of professionalism. Japan is an interesting place because, like, you can, I think it kind of gets put on a pedestal in a lot of ways, like some concepts, some ideas that you associate with the place. But we'll set that aside for now. I want you to imagine you are in Japan. And like a good foreigner, you're bad at traveling, you come here, you're trying to drive go-karts in the street, be a nuisance, whatever, right? But you're in a pinch. Where do you go? You go to McDonald's. And I think in JP McDonald's is where you can observe some of these concepts just at a surface level. What is that experience like? I want you to take in the back of your mind the experience of going to McDonald's in your home country and then comparing that to the image that you have of it in Japan. So for example, everything down to like the way employees dress, the way they greet and talk to customers, the way your food is presented here, right? This is a country that's all about cleanliness, don't be wasteful, yet they micro wrap every guy. That's a topic for another video. But anyway, the point is, you can observe a lot about what Japanese people and how Japanese people think about appearances and the concept of professionalism, even in a place like McDonald's. There are other cultural themes at play here, but it manifests in other ways, right? Regarding business culture. Think about the set of expectations and appearances that come with JP business culture that are maybe have like negative reputations, right? So stuff like unpaid overtime, people shuffling papers for hours to look busy until their boss has to leave, overly bureaucratic nonsense, the illusion of choice that comes with invitations to company events, even if it's to your own detriment or it's not convenient for you to go. The main point of this is that companies and businesses here culturally value cleanliness, and there is a strong value in not rocking the boat. Scandals in Japan can be huge blow-ups, and they can sometimes play out in really odd ways compared to their overseas counterparts. Obviously, no company in the world wants the stain of shame associated with them in public consciousness or news media. Sometimes companies will often react based on public perception and how it might affect their relationship with their constituents. This is one reason why you see companies willing to divorce employees or partners at the first sign of any trouble, regardless of the end result or who was guilty, innocent, whatever. They don't want the smoke at all here. Usually, they're deeply apologetic to the public in order to save face, and the role that public shame plays in all of this is really important to note as well. Compared to overseas companies where controversies can be a bit more wide open in terms of lingering effects, controversy here usually only has negative outcomes. Negative stigma feels like it lingers and sticks around longer here. And just anecdotally speaking, I can't prove that. It's just the way it feels. And you get a sense for it, I think, living here for a long time. JP society seems like, in my opinion, just feels more inclined to avoid engaging with an entity rather than investigating the truth for themselves or maybe coming to their own conclusion. There's a ton of quirks like these in JP business sense, but what I want to do with this video is highlight some interesting cases where we can observe JP business culture, its concept of professionalism, and how that has intersected in some of the strangest ways with the eSportsification of a scene I am an active participant in, fighting games. To be a pro. This was a theme of the mid to late 2010s with regards to several pro gaming scenes in Japan and the rise of pro player, streamer, influencer models, etc. Perception of industries and the judgmental eye of JP society has more influence on one's social standing and opportunities that come with that domestically. Stigma can be attached to different businesses, people, industries, and can take much longer to dispel here compared to the West. For example, streamers and competitive players often talk about the negative stigma that arcades and game centers had for being like hangouts for delinquents and, all kinds of bad stuff. And they felt like that held them back for a long time. Thus, professional players and media personalities in Japan found themselves asking the question, what does it mean to be a pro? And if I were to ask you this question, you might find that coming up with a satisfactory answer would be more difficult than you'd think it. What is a pro? Who is a pro? What defines that? Enter Jessu. Jessu was a newly introduced bridge between game publishers and the JP government, designed to more clearly manage, govern, navigate, and control events, prize pooling, and other aspects of pro gaming in Japan. JESU was essentially a coalition of stakeholders amongst JP publishers, event organizers, and lawyers that came up with a solution for how to navigate the space where a lot of titles in Japan that have cash prizing for events over a certain value. JESU essentially established a licensure system that players had to buy into and qualify for through results at events. But the idea was basically how JP gambling laws were interpreted for a long time, and the restrictions on first-party and third-party sponsorship prize money for game events according to those laws. This union was trusted to come to terms with these issues and allow for competitive game ecosystems in Japan to develop in ways that could compete with their overseas counterparts. For more information on this, check out this old video I made when all of this was going on at the time. Enter Momochi. This is a longtime fighting game phenom, and initially he was giving a lot of pushback to this JESU introduction, and the basis of his argument was like, what is a professional? If I'm player A and I'm a pro, and I lose to player B, a non-pro, in tournament, is player B a pro now? Who determines that? Why would people that we don't know and have zero connection to our community and our games be able to dictate how we perceive or operate our events, payout, qualifications, player status, all that, etc. Eventually, players bought into the system, and even Momochi eventually caved after a couple years of opposition. It even came into play once when he won a major event, but because he didn't go along with the licensure system, he wasn't eligible for the prize money. However, his concerns were not without merit. I ask you as well, consider streamers, players, competitive gaming ecosystems that, as you know them now, what does being a pro actually mean to you? Keep that in mind as we continue. Chapter 1, Language, or Human Rights and Hose of Light and Darkness.
どんな業界？例えばゲーム業界だったらゲームが上手いっていうやつ。プロゲーマーが一番上だよな。ゲーム業界なら大体プロゲーマーになったら女は食いやすいよなという。みんな身近な小さな界隈を見つけて、そこでボスザルになればいい。見た目とか水くとか、金稼ぐとかももちろん大事なんやけど、界隈で1位になるっていうのはやっぱり一番早い。それも歌だったらもっと小さめのところから探していこう。界隈で1位になれる。で、もし界隈で1位になれないんだったら、もっとちっちゃな界隈探せばいいから。できるだけ得意なことで、できるだけ小さなコミュニティから。で、そういうことをすると、闇のやりまん来ますけど、あなたが別に闇のやりまんから普通の女に変えてやることもできるんですよ。やっぱ女って男次第で変わるんで、闇のやりまんが寄ってきたら、俺がお前を女にしてやるよと。普通の女にしてやれ。しっかりと愛して。闇のやりまんもさ、やっぱり心の傷とかから闇のやりまん化してることが多いの。だから誰かが本当に愛してそいつを光のやりまんに変えてやることもできる。
In February 2022, a Japanese non-pro license holder but professional player, streamer, and commentator named Tanakana, mostly known for the Tekken series, and she's got this kind of like West Japan spunky kind of style way of speaking. She fires up her stream and just starts baking, right? She's just in the kitchen, just doing a cook stream, right? Casually shares a story about how her Uber Eats driver basically tried to holla at her, criticizing his height. Jinken nashi, she said.
165はちっちゃいね。ダメですね。170ないと正直人権ないんで、170センチない方は、俺って人権ないんだと思いながら生きていってください。骨延長の手術を検討してください。
Little did she know that this casual, off-the-cuff comment would change her life forever. You see, Jinken Ari, Jinken Nashi is casual gamer slang in JP circles, or at least it was up until this point. It's basically used as a way to say, like, you have merits as a game player or character player, in the same way a sailor would say, like, you got sea legs or something. Oh man, like, yo, I beat this guy in tournament. Jinken Ari, I am a player. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it was commonly used, but you have to understand the literal translation means is like, you don't have human rights or you have human rights. So the thing is this. Something you have to understand about JP on the internet is that trolls only need a drop of blood to swarm and start digging. There are some miserable people out here, and they want to take everybody with them. So this case was really layered because of the extrapolations, misinformation that was spread from online trolls, and the obfuscation of the truth that came with that. And the most bizarre thing too is just how quickly and how in just a crazy way this story left. It left like the Tekken scene, it left the fighting game scene, and it went just straight out of orbit. Once it's on the JP news sites, you know they have a headline, so then what happens? Then the overseas news outlets start picking it up. Then the YouTube slop channel channels. They don't know anything about fighting games. They don't know anything about her. It was really messed up, man, and they just took the headline and a lot of people just started running with it. Almost immediately, Red Bull and her team, Cyclops, divorced her and they closed contracts. Regardless of what the truth is, if a story is that widely propagated and believed to be true, does the truth matter to these companies, to their partners? You already know that to businesses in the public eye, just the answer is no. So essentially, she disappeared for a year or two from the internet. Now, fortunately, she was able to rebound in a really cool way. You know, it cost her a lot, and even though her grandfather and father passed away during that time, and her family was doxxed and harassed with phone calls, her father left her with some words of encouragement that basically inspired her to not give up. Don't lose to these people harassing you.
で、おとんの遺言お母さんとかおばあちゃんにしか言えんようなワイとか弟が電話に出たらそんな逃げるようなさ、そんなしょうもない奴らに負けんなよってお父さんは言ったから、もうお前はピンチをチャンスにして頑張れよってお父さんが遺言で言ったから、だから私は出ようと思うし。
So she came back with a new team. They gave her support. She started streaming again. Her comeback stream, she clears up a lot of the accusations. And all this while also being really good-natured about it and a little self-deprecating. But she leaned into the attitude and reputation that she had. So for example, she offered an olive branch to angry hobbits. She even started running events to find bald short dudes in Japan girlfriends. She published a book, and she even got married recently. There aren't a lot of cases like this one where the whirlwind was as layered and shitty as it was where it produced a decent ending like this one. Chapter 2. Ableist Language. Late Street Fighter V era, you were starting to see more media personalities outside of core fighting game players pick up Street Fighter and attempt to learn the game alongside their audiences. You have to know Street Fighter V had an abysmal release, and post-launch wasn't that much better, though the game did trend more positively towards the end of its lifespan. But by establishing this presence, it helped them with the launch of Street Fighter VI. Early on through collaboration events, the Street Fighter VI presence in Japan ballooned in a way that not only Street Fighter, but fighting games in general have not seen in a long time. At this point, it's basically just Street Fighter II. With this influx of new players and a wider audience, there are also new eyes and expectations. These players weren't just streaming and playing for core fighting game players anymore. They weren't just engaging with an audience that came from an arcade background, which had its own stigma attached to it, like we mentioned earlier. This was a brand new audience. Mago, legendary fighting game player, he started to grow his streaming platforms through lockdown, playing a variety of fighting and non-fighting game titles, especially a game like Valorant, which had a really big boom in Japan during Corona era. Aru, a well-known player and commentator in the Japanese Street Fighter scene, also transitioned into a professional commentator and host. So in July 2023, just a few months after Street Fighter VI's release, and the first EVO tournament for the game, JP Twitter and several news sites were aflame with public apologies from Capcom and Mago's team, Topanga. The reason? Ableist language. Mago, on his personal stream, in jest, associated players that use DJ with being mentally impaired or having brain damage. Now, I want you to think about your daily language and how you refer to players of certain characters in games, and realize just how tame or common this is across all games, not just fighting games. But anecdotally, it's definitely a thing for fighting games. It's definitely, I super judge certain players and certain characters. Hell, I judge players of certain games at this point. On a YouTube content series made by Japanese team Detonation Hakoshi, Aru in jest asked if two of younger players who he was with, they were kind of responding like shyly and soft-spoken when he was talking to them. He asked them if they were autistic. Aru was then removed from that week's episode of Street Fighter League, and Mago basically had to lay low for a week or two. But both of them kept their jobs and were fine overall. The criticism online was very real though, and it trended in mainstream news sources like Yahoo News. Chapter 3. Following the rules and pride as a professional. Pardon me for the soapbox here, but I gotta say it this way. If you've paid attention at all to the IRL streaming sphere, then you know how bad tourists have made life in Japan pretty uncomfortable for locals and foreign residents here, due to the triggered xenophobia that it's essentially functions as a catalyst for stuff like that. This, in addition to a slew of other issues, societal, cultural, etc., that are exacerbated by net uyoku, the right-wing JP netizen base, and conservative online media bases here, it's created the potential for pretty conservative policies and perspectives to start trending in Japan. A major source of local headaches of this is because of how bad tourists who have poor awareness but also exhibit like main character syndrome, they just get here, they think it's Disneyland, where people come here and act out in ways that they would never do at home. Partially due to, I think, fetishization of Japan, where people come here, they treat their experience here as if they're in a theme park, right? But in part, a lot of people just come here and they don't want to follow the rules. Don't let people fool you either. JP people here don't always follow the rules either. For example, if you voyage to the countryside, there are areas with very few foreign residents where locals, dump their trash in public. Anecdotally, I saw this a lot on my bike trip last year. But publicly facing, companies can be extremely anally retentive about rules. In situations where a lot of Western sensibilities will tell you, let sleeping dogs lie, or like no harm, no foul. In Japan, let's take a look at the Kobayan case. Kobayan, a young phenom Zangief player from Japan and professional players signed to AMG Answer M Gaming. He was on his way to Combo Breaker in Chicago last year to compete in Street Fighter 6 on the Capcom Pro Tour circuit when this tweet was randomly put out. Apparently, when he was being questioned by customs, he responded to the officer's questions in a dishonest way. I can't recall if what he said was revealed or quoted on JP Twitter, but in my mind, when the officer asked him for the purpose of his visit, and mind you, this is just like a guess or speculation on my part, but I guess he answered in a way that felt dishonest. I imagine he was like, I'm going sightseeing or I'm going to see a baseball game or something like that, and then the officer let him go. Well, he got cold feet on the way to the venue, contacted his manager, and then everyone sees this tweet. And JP Twitter was like, what the hell's going on here? I guess his management team felt like it was too risky for his future ability to be able to compete overseas if he were to get caught going to a tournament. When he said he was going to be signed, I don't know. But it was kind of a bizarre case for those of us watching from the sidelines. So the last case that I want to present is an example of pride in one's job and value. October 2024, Dogura, on his personal stream, a now crazy raccoon sign fighting game content creator, player, and streamer, and yeah, he's a legend in his own right. He was playing Valorant with another OG fighting game player, Kokujin. This is also a Zeta Division sign creator and employee, and also, both of these guys, they're old heads in the fighting game scene. Problem, Dogura is in Street Fighter League. If you're not familiar, Street Fighter League is a competitive Capcom organized league where companies buy in to establish franchises, teams, and players earn a salary for their appearances and play throughout the season. Season is long, it's a kind of rigorous schedule, but it's a big deal in Japan because these are salaried agreements for players. These kinds of agreements are really rare compared to usual open brackets where you have to just you have to fight through thousands of people to be able to get a piece of the prize pool. Having this kind of opportunity like this is a big deal. It's treasured in Japan. So Dogura has a match coming up. Kokujin asked Dogura if they should stop streaming since, Dogura has a match for SFL tomorrow. Shouldn't you be practicing or something? Dogura is like, nah, it's good. It's whatever. Kokujin's like, what the fuck? Your teammates will be pissed if they hear that. Dogura just laughs. He's like, nah, it's cool. For that tournament, it's whatever, man. He's like, wait, even if you guys get 4th place, is that okay? That's in this context, 4th place is a bad result. So Dogura says, it's fine. We'll get another shot next time. And then Kokujin's like, you guys only have 5 matches left, though. He's like, it's fine. We'll get them next time. Run it back next time. Run it back next time. So Kokujin's just kind of laughing all this off. And then it dawns on me, he's like, dude, there are people who are going to take you seriously when you say something like that, when you're just shrugging off the match that you have tomorrow, or, it's not that serious or whatever. Dogura even then comes to his senses. He's like, you know what, man? Seriously, if you clip this and ship it, out of context, it's going to sound kind of bad. Lo and behold, it was clipped and shipped, and it was bad. Dogura then kind of tried to offer an explanation on stream after it had blown up a bit, but many people remained very skeptical, and he mostly suggested he was joking, and that if he was really not motivated, would he be practicing every day? And he kind of encouraged people to think beyond the words and look at the behavior, but this drew a lot of ire from fans, followers, and supporters alike. And it had some pretty polarizing perspectives on how strict things might have gotten versus having a sense of pride in the job and opportunity people felt Dogura should have. SFL spots are coveted in Japan, and so this rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including some of the other competitors. Sasamo, a player from an opposing team, expressed displeasure with this comment and the implication of it even as a joke. He said, as a player front and center in the public eye, you gotta be more careful about your words, man, and how those can be interpreted, even if it is a joke. This example might have seemed like a tame Enjo. Enjo is like a blow up or something. But it's also one that highlights a dissonance between the idea of players as professionals, their personalities as players, their responsibility to the publisher and event organizers and teammates. In the end, for better or worse, things have changed so much for these games and the industry around them, and these are just cases where there's a bit of culture shock between the real world of Japan and for what was a long time a grassroots gaming community. As someone who got in the fighting games around 2007, 2008, I found the energy, the sense of culture, and the competitive drive that was instilled in its members, I just found that highly compelling. As time's gone on, the games have changed, the community, the standards, the attitude, the culture have all changed as well, for better or worse. Likewise, Japan's community is no stranger to growing pains in different and sometimes delayed, later ways compared to the West. As we continue in this modern era defined by corporate partnerships, team memberships, and in some ways even the idea of the publisher as an employer, we also have to change the way that we think about the player as a professional. While I'm torn, and by no means do I want the Western world to adhere to the standards that we can see here, where, we, in some cases, okay, this language thing, that's reasonable, right? But, to a degree, there's something that needs to be said regarding professionalism and the attitude towards games if you want them to be your job. See, we can split hairs and get granular about the money you make from something or your certifications, but this is competitive games we're talking about. I'm not someone trying to prove something to a government body or anything like that. Rather than focus on stuff like that, I focus on the attitude of a professional and what that means. Even if it's something that started as a hobby, when it becomes work, the attitude, the ideals, the social aims, and the commitment to values attached to that as a professional is more valuable to me than money, certifications, titles. If you're doing this as a hobby and you're just lucky to be doing it for fun, that's fine. But if you want it to be your job, on some level, don't you have to treat it like one? Even if it's just games we're talking about, I'm curious what you guys have to say. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Big ups to everybody who's a member, and thanks to all the subscribers. Catch you guys next time. Everybody be easy.